You wrote this book called The World as It Is, which is a pretty authoritative title, as it is. So I want to get your take on a few things. Russian meddling.
Yeah.
You know, that's the part that right away when I opened your book, I went right to it. And then you get to this and say, those were limits that, quote, in hindsight, did not extend far enough to encompass the scale of the assault on our democracy. If you watch something like MSNBC, that is the understatement of the presidency. Didn't go far enough.
Yeah.
What should he have done?
Well, what I talk about that I think we could have done more of is before the election, we did put out this statement from the intelligence community saying Russia was meddling, and it focused on hacking. What we did not talk about was the information war, the creation and dissemination of fake news. The fact that you had tens of millions of Americans who were literally consuming Russian-created propaganda on behalf of Donald Trump.
Right.
And I think what the mistake was, and where we fell short, is that we dealt with the issue in the way that the U.S. government knew how to deal with the issue. In other words, the U.S. government deals with cybersecurity. Somebody's hacking. We need to stop that. We need to protect the election infrastructure. This whole question of what do you do when a foreign adversary is literally flooding American social media feeds with news, that was a new thing. We actually didn't have a tool to respond to that.
Why did they create a tool?
Well, we tried to, and what was so interesting about this is, and I describe in the book, we had seen Russia create this information war capability in Ukraine. So what they did is they created thousands of social media profiles. They flooded European social media feeds with fake news about
Ukraine. Like an A/B test. They tried to roll it out, see what worked.
Yeah, exactly. So remember when the plane was shot down, the civilian airplane was shot down over Ukraine, clearly by Russian-backed separatists, with Russian weapons probably. Well, what Russia did is they created all kinds of conspiracy theories about what actually happened that were not true, and they flooded that into Europe. And they took that same capability and brought it into the United States. Now we had been, because we're in the National Security Council, we're focused on the rest of the world and how do we stop this from happening? How do we help Europe fight back against this? When it came to the United States, we realized we didn't have good tools for this because we can't go into your Facebook feed and say, this is fake news and this isn't. I mean, the U.S. government just doesn't have the ability to be kind of the editor-in-chief.
Then you'd have a scandal on your hands.
Yeah, exactly. So we got stuck in this difficult position, and I think in retrospect we should have done more to educate people, to warn people about the fact that Russia was creating this fake news content. Everybody got so focused on the stolen emails and the hacked emails. That was only one piece of what Russia is doing. I think we could have done more to paint the whole picture.
You've spent a career in national security. Looking today, do you think Russian meddling, which has gotten so much attention, is the biggest threat to our democracy? Or do you think internally undermining our institutions poses a larger threat long-term to our country?
I think absolutely the internal threat to our institutions is a bigger long-term danger. The Russians, in a way, found the soft spots in our society. In other words, they saw the polarization, they saw that people were inclined to believe anything negative about the other side, and they just fired a bunch of information at that polarization. And the risk now, though, is that we have a president who does not respect the independence of the judiciary, does not respect the independence of the law enforcement community, who's trying to undermine the credibility of an investigation about the most serious matter possible, Russia meddling in our election. And I worry that Americans' faith in our institutions, in our government, in our law enforcement, is being severely eroded. And I don't know how you get that back when it's gone. And so the real test, I think, of the Trump presidency is going to be, what does it look like 2.5 or, if things don't go the way I want them in the next election 6 years from now, like how much damage has been done to the credibility of our democratic institutions?
So the U.S. has largely pulled out of the Iran deal. It's done. What now?
Well,
is there still meddling in neighbors' affairs and all of this?
I think this is the thing I worry about the most in terms of what he's done with our legacy, because you had in place a framework that prevented Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, that put constraints on their program, had international inspectors in. I think without the U.S. in the deal, I don't see how it survives. And so what I expect to happen over time is it starts to fray. The Iranians start to say, well, we're not getting the relief that was promised us with the U.S. out of the deal. We're going to start doing things on the nuclear side. And what is particularly maddening to those of us who served in the Obama administration is, for all the criticism that they lobbed at the Iran deal, what they're lifting up as a big triumph with North Korea is literally a shell of what was in the Iran deal. The Iran deal is over 150 pages, international inspectors, shipping out 98% of their nuclear deal. They emerged with a 400-word statement with the North Koreans with a kind of empty commitment to denuclearize, and they're treating it as the greatest thing that's ever happened in diplomacy. There's a double standard here that is so obvious that it is a bit maddening for those of us who spent 7 years to get to an Iran deal.